What's going on, guys? Andrew Piluk Hockey here, back with another video. Today we're going to be looking at some moves that the Toronto Maple Leafs might make at the NHL draft. Now, the key word here is might. These are just assumptions, maybe some guesses and some predictions by myself, with some supporting information that we've been hearing over the last few days on what the Leafs might be doing. Now, we all know that the rumors can change any second, so if you're watching this after something else has come out, I can't predict the future. So we're going to get right into this video. If you're new, make sure to subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. I will be live during the first round of the NHL draft tomorrow, Friday. So this is going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys will enjoy this video. I wrote some stuff down on my whiteboard before I was preparing. And I was thinking about some options that the Leafs might have, and I've got their cap friendly and some information in front of me. And the number one trade that they could probably make at the NHL draft is going to be Connor Brown. Now, this seems like an easy move for them to clear out $2.1 million of cap space. But at the same time, it also does hurt. It eliminates depth. Now, I know a lot of people will say, oh, well, you know, Connor Brown's not really the greatest. He didn't play good last year. Well, here's the thing. Connor Brown probably excels a little bit more in a higher option in the lineup. When he played with Matthews, of course, it's easy to play with a guy like that, but he did pretty well for himself. He scored 20 goals, and I believe he's had a 14-goal season as well, 14 or 15. And he's got a decent contract. You got to look at some players, what they're making these days. Connor Brown's on a decent contract. He can play on your penalty kill. And I'm sure even some teams would like him out front of the net on a power play. I don't think he's overly great, but I also don't think he's a bad player either. Defensively, he's not bad. He's a quick guy. He can skate really fast. And I think that the Leafs, if they had cap space, because right now the projected cap space is just under $8 million without Horton on the LTIR, of course, I'm guessing that they would really like, to keep a guy like Connor Brown. But it's just not possible. You've got to sign Marner. You got to sign Johansson. You got to sign Kapanen. Now, we'll get to all of that later, but the word around Connor Brown is that he is being shopped. He was shopped last year at the trade deadline. There was rumors that he was going to be going to the Edmonton Oilers for Benning. There was also some rumors that maybe he could be part of a bigger package for Larson. I don't think they go that route. I still think they circle back to the Oilers, but from what Elliotte Friedman has been saying lately, if the Leafs really want to get some cap space and they're trying everything they can, then you're probably going to look at them just looking for a second-round pick or a third-round pick. I would think the Leafs are looking at a second-round pick or maybe a prospect that another team isn't going to use. But I think that the Leafs would like to get a higher pick. I don't think it's going to be a second. I think it's more likely to be a third and like a fringe prospect. But that's just my opinion on that. But Connor Brown seems to be the most likely piece that's going to be moved at the NHL draft. And again, all these things I'm not saying are going to happen. This is just a likelihood. I'm going in order of what might happen. Number two that I have written down is Nikita Zaitsev. Sorry, I had to look down again because I have two guys that I thought I was going to swap, but I kept Zaitsev at number two. The reason I say that is because he is a top four defenseman according to a lot of people in the NHL. I believe he's still a bottom pairing type of defenseman. If he's not playing the defensive role, sure, you can slide him into that fourth spot on certain teams. But Babcock plays him in a role that I don't think he excels in. And in his first season with the Leafs, I think he actually did quite well. Offensively, his numbers were good. He was getting some power play time, and he was also not really being held accountable for all these defensive assignments. Whereas now he's a penalty killer. They like him defensively. And let's be honest, in the playoffs, he looked pretty good with Jake Muzzin. And in a perfect world, if the Leafs have more cap space, maybe they hold on to a guy like Nikita Zaitsev, but his contract is just too long. $4.5 million for a guy. He's got a contract till the 2024-25 season. I don't think the Leafs can afford that much money right now. If they are able to move a guy that I'm going to talk about later, Patrick Marleau, then maybe they think about it if they're not feeling like they're getting good value back. But the word around was that, and again, these are not my word around sources, from guys like Elliotte Friedman, LeBrun, McKenzie, those guys, are saying that the Leafs were looking for a prospect and a bottom pairing defenseman to at least replace him so that way there was somebody else there. Now, a lot of people want to say, well, Sandin, Liljegren, those guys are coming up, no worries. I don't think the Leafs are overly ready to bring up Sandin. You could see a guy like Liljegren being put into the bottom pairing, being mentored by a player who could possibly be Ron Hainsey coming back for a one-year deal. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want Ron Hainsey to be getting big money and big minutes, but if he came back for 1 year to mentor on the bottom pairing and didn't get big minutes, I'm totally okay with that. But getting back to that whole situation, Rosen is a guy that can move up. They might give Borgman a look, and maybe Sandin gets a look around the trade deadline and gets the Travis Dermott treatment, and to see if, you know, he can stick around with the team. But moving Zaitsev, yes, I'm not a big fan of him. I was a fan when he signed the deal, because looking at his point totals and, you know, the way he was playing, I was actually okay with the contract, because looking at the numbers that some people get, it's absolutely ridiculous these days. But he's not producing offensively, and he does make mistakes defensively, and unfortunately he doesn't make up for them on the stat sheet. So they're going to have to move on from him. And it's looking like there are teams that are interested. Apparently the Oilers have interest. I don't see that happening. Then, of course, we heard the interest with Vancouver. Now, if Myers and Gardner decide to go somewhere else, or if Benning feels like he's not getting a defenseman through a trade that he wants to make, then maybe they turn back to Zaitsev. But I don't think that Zaitsev is any team's first option. So the Leafs might have to add a sweetener. And a lot of people are saying that some teams value a sweetener as Janssen or a Kapanen for a deal for Zaitsev or Marleau. But I think that there's a lot of GMs too around the league that I've calmed that down a little bit, knowing that the Leafs won't do something like that. And it could be a high pick or a Connor Brown or even a decent prospect like a Timashov, or some people could talk about Bracco. I don't know. We'll get to that in the Marleau piece. But Zaitsev looks like he could be a trade option. And, you know, thanks for everything, I guess, Zaitsev. If you do come back, then great. But only if the Leafs clear out some cap space. And looking at the deal that Edler just got in Vancouver, it's looking like you're probably not going to have a chance of bringing back Gardner, even with some trades. My number 3 piece here for trades is the Leafs might look at a depth forward, depth defenseman, of course, and maybe even a backup goaltender. So this is the depth section. This is where the Leafs are going to be looking to bring on some pieces that they can work with on maybe their bottom line, or for the Marlies, or, you know, backup goaltending and defense. They're going to have to bring in cheap defensemen to fill out that bottom pairing if they don't feel like they have any young prospects ready. So here's my thing. Sparks has apparently been being shopped around a little bit. I still feel like the Leafs are going to give him another shot to be the backup goalie next year, because he is cheaper. I believe, what is he at? $725,000, $750,000. It's for one more year, and then you've got Freddie Anderson for this season and the next season. So I think that they're hoping that Sparks can provide a little bit of a spark. Sorry, guys. In the backup goalie position, because he is cheap. And I made a video about it already, guys. There's a lot of goalies out there, sure, that you can bring in as a backup, but the way it's looking right now, you got goalies like Mrazek and McElhaney who, yeah, they played good for Carolina this year. They had like career years, and now they're expecting to be paid, you know, pretty decent money. The Leafs can't afford to bring goalies in like that, because they want too much money, and the Leafs can't afford it. They need to focus on their blue line and getting guys like Janssen, Kapanen, and Marner signed. So, you know, the pipe dream of bringing in these big, expensive backup goalies is not going to work. You have to have a guy that's under $1 million, and Sparks is the guy that's going to provide that. Some people are saying, what about Hutchinson? I believe he's an unrestricted free agent as well. He might be cheap, but I also don't really think Hutchinson and Sparks are that far apart. I hate to say it. Sparks' season last year was an outlier. By that I mean he had a bad season for the first time in a while. And of course, it had to be in his first season in the NHL. I think that he rebounds. He did a lot of work at the end of the season when the Leafs were in the playoffs against Boston. I fully believe that he will have a chance to rebound this season, and I think that because he's cheap, that's going to work. Now, I don't think the Leafs are going to be making too many trades when it comes to depth forwards, because I think a lot of people are overlooking some of the talent the Leafs have in the Marley system. I think Timashov is a sleeper guy that could maybe move up. Marchment seems to be a guy that can play for the Leafs next season. He's big. He's a Babcock type of player. He can hit. He's got some grit to him. Then you've got a guy like Engvall who does the same things. He can put up points as well. Mikheyev, who Babcock and Dubas are both very high on. He was one of the best, if not the biggest international free agent. A lot of people think that he could play on the third or fourth line. So maybe not the depth forward stuff, maybe for the Marlies, because we know Dubas is very in touch with that because he was the GM of the Marlies before, and you need to make those moves. But Depth defenseman could be a Benning. People are saying Miller could be a good top 4 guy to go after. Again, he's not really depth. He would at least provide some good for the top 4 for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So those type of moves could be made by Kyle Dubas, moving up and down in the draft to acquire more picks. He's done it before. He may do it again. So my number 3 option is depth moves. Number 4 is Patrick Marleau. So getting back to what I told you guys earlier about teams looking for sweeteners in a deal for Nikita Zaitsev. Well, there's been reports that if Marleau was going to get traded, that he would like to go back to San Jose. That's not happening. They can't afford it. But you can go to another team who will buy Marleau out. You give them the sweetener that they take on his full cap hit, because if you buy him out, it stays against the cap because he's 35 or older. So you go to a team like they were talking about before, Arizona, where they're like, okay, we'll take him because we can eat his cap. We'll buy him out, and then maybe he goes and plays for San Jose, or he picks another team that he wants to go to. You could do that with Ottawa. You can do it with a bunch of teams. It's just whether or not they're going to buy him out, which would probably be discussed before. So they'll want a sweetener. So like I said, LeBrun was talking about teams wanting Kapanen or Janssen attached to Marleau or Zaitsev, but more specifically Marleau, as a sweetener to a deal. Now, it's apparently been talked down that there might be a chance that a pick and a decent prospect, or a guy like Brown could be a sweetener, a guy like Bracco could be a sweetener, and I know Bracco might hurt for some people, but I think a lot of people ignore that Bracco isn't the greatest 5-on-5 scorer. He's really good on the power play, and he has problems defensively. So if you have to attach him to a Marleau to get rid of all that cap space, I personally would do it. I don't know about anybody else, but I would attach Bracco to that contract. And I know a lot of people will absolutely hate that, and that I'm saying that. That's just my opinion. Guys, it's getting down to the point where the next guy I'm talking about is really starting to scare a lot of people, including me. So yes, Marleau could be traded, but it's more likely that he's a Leaf next year if teams are not willing to take a little bit less in a sweetener. The Toronto Maple Leafs have to make a lot of big moves, and Marleau might be one of the biggest. I have him at number 4 because although his family has moved back, and it looks like he wants to be moved back to San Jose, which can't happen because of their cap situation, it's all up in the air. I don't know if he's a possibility to get traded anymore. That's why I have him at number 4. At number 5 is Mitch Marner. Now, I really didn't think that this was an option now, but let me just bring up a tweet for you guys. So we've been hearing the $11.5, the $12 million, which I hate to say it to you guys, is absolutely ridiculous. Mitch Marner is not an $11 million player. Unless he stretches out that deal, even that is ridiculous to 8 years. I just don't see how that makes sense. Friedman said the Leafs told Mitch Marner if he wants the big number, $11 million per season, he needs to sign for 8 years. Marner is not prepared for that. So let me just swing back to something for you guys. The other day, Kevin Hayes was signed by the Philadelphia Flyers at a cap hit that would give him $7.14 million. A lot of people are going to say I'm wrong, but William Nylander's deal is an absolute steal. Again, $6.9 million for a guy who's had more points than Kevin Hayes twice. Kevin Hayes' biggest season is 53 points or 55 points. Nylander's done that twice at 61 points. So we're starting to see some deals that look bad, and it looks like Dubas has made a good deal with William Nylander, who will rebound next season. If Mitch Marner wants that big money, unfortunately, guys, Mitch Marner needs to go. It's too much money. That is way, way more than I think a lot of people were expecting him to get. I thought $10 million was the max the Leafs will go. And it's looking like it could be more than that. A lot of teams, I hate to say it, will not be doing the 4 first-round picks offer sheet. If anything, it'll be the second tier sheet, which I believe is like a first, 2 seconds, and a third or something like that. But I don't believe that teams are willing to make Mitch Marner the highest paid winger in NHL history. So this is a tweet from Jeff Viette that makes a ton of sense. He quoted somebody saying the Leafs have told Mitch Marner that if he wants the big numbers, which is probably Elliot Friedman from the tweet before, but Sportsnet's got a bunch of people saying some of the same stuff, which I'm not dissing them for that, but I believe this is the Friedman tweet that said if he wants the big money, he has to go 8 years. 11 times 8, 11 million over 8 years, or times 8 years would make him the highest paid winger in history. If that's a non-starter for Mitch Marner's camp, then this is a problem. That's what Jeff Viette said. I completely agree with it. If that doesn't get them thinking, okay, well, maybe we can make this happen, then there's a massive problem. The Leafs and Marner, they need to patch something up. Although Elliot Friedman said last night at the NHL Awards that the Leafs are telling teams that they're not willing to trade him, that there's a market of teams that are willing to at least, check in and see if that's a possibility. But they've also said that they believe that the Leafs and Marner, they know that the relationship is there and that they want to get this deal done. But at the same time, if Marner's camp is going to come in with these ridiculous numbers, it might very well have to be a trade, because these numbers are absolutely out of this world to think that he is going to get paid that much money. I think that the Leafs need to go to 10 million, and then, you know, it might have to be by 6 years. It might have to. It's not going to be 8 years if it's 10 million, especially at that number. But they're going to have to explore some moves here, because that's just way too much money. I really did not think they were going to go past 10 million. And if that's a non-starter, like Jeff said, then there's a big gap there that the Leafs are not going to be able to patch up, because it's just too much. Even if you trade Zaitsev and Marleau, that's still almost as a problem, because you got to get guys like Kapanen and Janssen done, although I do believe Kapanen could get traded before the season starts. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you will enjoy the NHL draft. I will be streaming round 1, so make sure to come and stop by. Maybe there'll be some trades. And this was a very long video. I didn't expect it to be this long, but I'll see you guys in the next video or stream. Peace.